Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the Standard Club's third webinar in our Seafarer Wellbeing series. My name's James Bean, the Managing Director of the Standard Club UK, and it's my honour to be moderating today's session. Sorry for being a little bit slow to the broadcast today. We've been having a couple of little technical difficulties and we're down one panellist, but we're very hopeful that he's going to join us very shortly. Anyway, introducing what is going to be our four guest speakers, we're delighted to have with us today the club's very own Captain Yves van der Born, Director of Loss Prevention. We've also got Ian Stokes, who's Head of Corporate Engagement at Stella Maris. Deacon Peter Barragan, Port Chaplain for Port of Tees, Hartlepool and Seaham. And then hopefully, if he finds his way to the webinar, Captain Artur Olbromski, who's also an experienced LPG master. So a very warm welcome to our four panelists today, and thank you very much for giving up your time to present. Yves will give more detail on what we're going to be covering, but today's discussion will focus on various elements of seafarer wellbeing, taking a closer look at how Stella Maris is supporting seafarers and their families, and what life is like during the current COVID-19 health pandemic from a seafarer's perspective. But before I hand over to Yves to kick off today's session, there's just one piece of admin. Our panelists have kindly agreed to take some questions at the end, so if you could use the questions box or use the chat box to add your questions, that would be great. And if you do want to direct them to a specific panelist, if you just put their name at the start of the question, I'll make sure the question finds its way to the right person. Otherwise, we'll open it up to all four of our panelists to answer. So with no further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Captain Yves van der Born to kick us all off. Yves, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We have quite a good attendance, I see, so that's quite interesting. Please do let us have your questions and we'll be very happy to answer them later. As James was mentioning, this is the third of our webinar series on the topic of mental well-being, seafarer well-being. Our first two webinars were with Mission to Seafarers and with EASE1. Those were back in June and July, and we thought it would be good, now that the summer months are past, to have a look at where are we now with the whole COVID-19 situation, with crew changes, with the well-being of seafarers on board. So we organized this third one, and we are really happy and honored that we can have Stella Maris with us for this webinar, who are in a similar way but different, but I'm sure Ian will point out the differences. Compared to Mission to Seafarers and EASE1, they are also very closely involved with helping out seafarers worldwide. And we wanted to hear from them later on their own experience with the mental well-being, with the COVID situation, how is everything evolving. And then we wanted to do this webinar a little bit different, in the sense that we wanted to have the view and the voice of the seafarer themselves in here. We wanted to hear from them, how is it? And we found this Captain Artur. Well, we lost him a little bit now, but let's hope we find him. And he can then talk about his experience on board, having issues with the crew change, having issues with spare parts. So that will come as well later. On the topic of crew change, what we want to talk about, I was looking online and I saw one of the more recent reports that came out is mentioning that there are about 300,000 seafarers at the moment stuck out at sea. Don't know how accurate the number is, but it certainly sounds plausible to me that there are that many seafarers waiting for crew change to be able to be done. Does that mean that we are still having a lot of problems? It's something I would want to find out later from our panelists. And we know that there's a large number of organizations, including the IG, the International Chamber of Shipping, the IMO, that have done a lot to try and make these crew changes possible. They have pushed very hard for seafarers to get the key worker status. They have pushed all the flag states to put procedures in place. They have on their website made available a lot of guidelines and resources that can assist all these flag states to prepare for the crew changes. So does that mean then that it is working? I think there are quite a lot of success stories, and from other webinars that I have attended or participated in, I know that there are good success stories. I know a lot has been done, but given the big backlog of seafarers, if that 300,000 is correct, a lot more still needs to be done. And sadly enough, what you can see in the news on an almost daily basis is if one of these seafarers that is being signed on or signed off happens to be tested positive with the coronavirus, it somehow puts off that whole flag state, and they start changing their procedures again, and they start locking down again. So that, of course, does not help if there is one rotten apple in the basket that then spoils it for everyone else who is actually nicely following the procedures that are put in place. Now, it's not an easy task either in order to be able to get the crew changes done. And there is a whole string of companies and organizations that all need to work together to make it possible. Your customs, your security personnel, your immigration, transport arrangements between the airport, a hotel that is specially available just for the quarantine period, airlines, which is a major issue at the moment as well. So all of these things need to come together in order to make a crew change a success, which is, if only one of these falls out, well, that's really problematic then. Quite recently, there was a plea from the Secretary General of the ICS when he addressed the Maritime Summit from the ministers, where he again pushed very much for crew changes to be able to be done by the port states. More recently, the Secretary General of the IMO spoke ahead of the General Assembly of the United Nations, which will start in a couple of weeks, again asking for governments to take more action on resolving this crew change crisis that is going on. Now, what we can see from the recent Seafarer Happiness Index that was published in, I believe it was late July, it's quite recent that it was published, and it was looking at the period the second quarter of this year. It showed a clear decline in happiness from seafarers worldwide. It was quite clear from the report that the fears for contracting the virus, a perceived lack of precautions available on board of ships, and heavy workloads as a result of prolonged contracts on board of ships were resulting in seafarers in general being less happy on board of ships. Now, all of that combined with the long periods that seafarers are out at sea, is really a high risk on having mental and physical well-being problems on board of ships. And that's really where we would want to have the input from Stella Maris on one hand, and Captain Artur, who now has happily joined us later on as well. I am going to hand it over to Ian first. Ian, if you could give us a little bit of an introduction, please, on what it is that Stella Maris does. I know we had a small video available that does a really good job, and we'll try and circulate it to all the delegates in our follow-up email after the webinar. But if you could put it in words, please, what Stella Maris is doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Yves. That's fantastic. Thank you to you and Standard Club for inviting us on this webinar. It's a pleasure and an honour to speak to the forum. Stella Maris, we are the largest international ship visiting charity in the world. We look after the welfare and the well-being of all seafarers, and we've been doing this for 100 years. So we were formed in October 1920 on the banks of the Clyde in Glasgow. So we are celebrating our centenary next month. We did have a lot of plans, but obviously we've had to amend those somewhat given the situation. We've also officially changed our name to Stella Maris. People will know us as Apostleship of the Sea around the world, but we are Stella Maris now. That is our official name now going forward. We have a global network of around 1,000 chaplains and volunteers in over 300 ports in around 60 countries globally. And it's quite a remarkable team. It's an amazing network that we have, that basically they will conduct in a normal year, and obviously this is not a normal year, but normally they will conduct around 70,000 ship visits annually across the world. And they do that to provide welfare services to the seafarers. They provide advice, friendship, practical care, pastoral care. All sorts of issues come up while our guys are on board ships. And they do this for all seafarers, so regardless of race, nationality, faith, colour, creed, they don't know who's on board the ships when they're going up the gangway. So they are there to assist and to help everybody. And a lot of the help comes through just talking to our guys, because they are neutral, they're independent, they're completely separate from the maritime industry in which they work. So guys can on board the ship can feel they trust our chaplains and volunteers, and can talk about their money worries, talk about their family issues, talk about their health issues that they may not wish to talk about to their crew or to the companies that they work for. And this is where we find the value in terms of mental health, because they can get their worries off their chests and talk to us. And if it's a serious issue, we can try and resolve it. And increasingly, we do see serious issues, and we do help with serious concerns. And aside from picking up these issues from talking to the seafarers, increasingly now we are being contacted for help by people like the P&I clubs, by the management companies, by the port authorities, when there's a serious issue. And by that, we know what they are. They are, the piracy that goes on these days, abandonment of crews, which is still going on, accidents on board ship, death by natural causes, fatalities, and unfortunately the suicides, and we've seen a slight uptick in those in the current crisis as well. So we get called in, our guys get called in to assist and to help with the crews to deal with those issues and the ongoing issues, and also to help with the families, so we can get in touch with the families who may be thousands and thousands of miles away, and we're a really vital port of call for them to find out what's going on and to connect them with the situation. Because of our international spread, we can provide an ongoing service of care, if you like. So we don't just go on board a ship in the T's and help out, and then it stops there. Often they will have to, if there is a fatality on board, the ship has to move on. We will pick them up in the next port. If they go to Germany, if they go to the States, we will contact our people there and say, look out for this ship. And if the seafarers are struggling, and they often are, there's nothing more reassuring than the sight of someone waiting for them on the quayside to come and say, look, we know you've had issues, we can talk to you, we can help you out. So that in a nutshell is what we do and what we are there for. I mentioned we have an excellent team of chaplains and volunteers around the globe. Perhaps it's now a good time to hand over to my colleague Deacon Peter Barrigan, who's absolutely on the front line doing this stuff day in and day out with his team up in the northeast, and doing an incredible job. So Peter, can I hand over to you now to tell them about what you do?
unmute first. Yes, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I think things are the same as it always is in some ways. The seafarers that we go on board, first priority communication. Can I get in touch with my family? I've had text messages this morning from 6 o'clock, container shipping on the Tees. Sir, can you please forward us some top-ups? We need to get in touch with the family, so find out what they need, and then we send off the vouchers. And we do that we're literally daily, we're getting contact from ships around Europe. In the last month, I think we spent £2,500 buying top-ups and sending them out. We do get the money back eventually from the guys. They're very keen to pay us, and that can take over a few months. But we've sent top-ups from the Tees to Rotterdam, Milford Haven, Le Havre, off the Thames, Stargate. We also have the MiFi units. We have one that we can take on board to ships as well. So there's free access when some of the ships come in. But that's the key thing, getting in touch with the families is always what they want to hear. You can talk about anything else, that's the first thing they want to do. And that's what we try and provide where needed. Some ports are giving free Wi-Fi. I know CM is up the road, free Wi-Fi to the guys there. The other thing, again, a regular request for help for the seafarers is non-payment of wages. That obviously impacts on the family as well. So there are crews who are not getting paid, delayed payments as well. So we try and signpost them for things like that. One thing that revolves around that is people need to send money home. So they give us money to send home to families. A colleague on the Clyde had said that the one lady seafarer from Brazil tried to send money home online and lost it all. It was a scam. So we've stepped in to try and help there and get money sent to our families. So she's very grateful for that. I think there's a sense sometimes with the seafarers that the world's forgotten them. You know, at this time, you know, they're bringing the goods in. The supermarkets have stuff on the shelves only because seafarers are at sea. There is that sense sometimes that there is no priority for them, and I know that's changing. Some of the crew changes are happening, and that there's a worry now that when they do go home, quarantine issues, so they may get off the ship, but they'll be stuck in hotels for a few weeks, but at least the home. And time ashore, you know, in this country we allow people time ashore, but some companies have stopped them leaving the ship altogether. You know, people obviously having direction from their company about not going ashore, but they would like a bit of time on terra firma just to feel the grass beneath their feet sometimes. But also the positive thing is, you know, I was talking to a guy the other night on a tanker, very grateful that he's at sea. He's getting paid, but conscious of his colleagues back home who are not getting new contracts, who are not being allocated to ships. Talking about some of the guys in the Philippines that are stuck in the centres there have been in lockdown since March. I know Paolo out there is looking after them. They've been in these centres since March. Some of them, 75% of them are still there. We're trying to look after them, you know, with the help of other agencies as well. So there is a sense of, you know, the guys on board at least getting paid and they can help their families and conscious of their colleagues back at home who aren't getting any new contracts at the moment. So that's a worry for them. We try to do what we do. I mean, the strangest thing is, you know, we take all sorts to the ships free of charge. We've got a couple of incidents in the last month where guys, because of the aircrafts and moving people from one country to the other, two guys on two different ships lost all their luggage had been lost. So they were looking to a 6-9 month contract with what they were standing up in. So one was a Russian on one ship, one's a Filipino. So I managed to kit them all out. In fact, one of the guys took that much. I think he was going to kit his whole family out when he got home. Took that much gear. So we're able to provide stuff like that, which our supporters help us with in the local parishes and welfare organisations. They donate stuff for us to give to the seafarer to help those in need. We're also presenting them with welfare packs when they come in, because some have run out of toiletries on some of the ships and that. So we had one instance where we went with a welfare pack, some goodies in, and the guys just said, "Have you got any toothpaste?" And we said, "Well, there was one tube in the bag." And so I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, there's 5 of us on the last tube of toothpaste on the ship, so they're all sharing the one tube of toothpaste." And that's important. So we went back, they all got a tube of toothpaste. And we always believe you can't underestimate the effect of, one act of kindness, a little act of kindness as we go around. A lot of our time as well is listening to the guys. We're not going on the ships now due to the COVID, but the guys come down the gangway and they'll tell you about the families and what's going on. And we help where we can with that, with listening to them and then seeing what we can do to help. Am I right to continue? So continue.
I think that was a really good introduction, both Ian and Peter. Thank you so much for that. We'll come back again to you for more. I wanted to pass on for a while to Captain Artur. Artur, you've been at sea for 30 years. You've been a master for about 20, I believe. You are a gas tanker specialist. From your perspective, from your recent contracts that you were on, in brief, what were your experiences with the crew change?
I think Artur just has to unmute himself.
The microphone symbol up on the top right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So as you said, I'm working on the gas carriers, which are kind of cream of the fleet. Yes. So the owners treat us a bit better. We do not experience most of the problems you said, like communication. We have always communication available with internet. Of course, it was paid before, and due to the coronavirus suspension of crew change in March, the company, to improve the feelings of the seamen, provide us with free internet access. Some company does it all the time. Our company did it for the coronavirus situation. I was on the board since January, and my planned contract was 3 months, but because of the COVID, it was extended 2 months. The feelings on board were various, depends basically not of the nationality, but of the age and experience of the seamen. The older guys, we are used to get shit all the time. For us, it's normal that we are delayed, so 1 month delay is kind of standard. But of course, 2 months is a bit more, and the problem was mainly with the junior officers, because for them, especially with third mate, had a problem because he was due home on end of February, but because of the ship route and availability of ports, well, we were not able to disembark him on time, and then come the COVID. So he was the worst case, but because I was pushing all the time crewing and agents independently, we managed to get permission to disembark crew without crew change. And because I have extra third mate and suddenly we start having long trips, I decided with chief officer that we will manage without third mate, having extra third mate. So chief went on the watches for a moment, but this guy who was in a poorest state, we sent him home without relief. And at the same time, I managed to send the cadet who also was finishing his contract. But the guys who needed the relief, that is different story, because we cannot abandon the vessel. The vessel have to keep running. This is our professional pride. So we were waiting for opportunity. The problem was a little bit, because we have the communication abilities, the crew was not depending on me on communication. They were digging the internet, and they would know before me in the morning which countries today allow the crew change, which countries allow to fly, etc. They were monitoring closely. And of course, once we have the cargo between Chile and South Africa, there was a lot of unhappiness, and basically because they know nothing we can do. Yes, they know that it's not the owner fault, not the operator, but it is just the world which went crazy. They all wanted us to perform our job. We slowly start getting services. The first, most important for us, the crew, was the food, because at some point in the end of March, I ran out of fresh vegetables, milk, etc., eggs. So that was a bit desperate, and I didn't hesitate to clearly send the message that, okay, I take the cargo, but I'm not leaving Chile until the food is delivered. That's it. And do what you want. You can arrest me and send me home. I'm fine with it. And of course it worked. We get the food, and it wasn't easy because it was already lockdown. So the food was delivered in the last day before lockdown, and the pilot boats were only allowed to approach the vessel. So we had like 5 trips by the pilot boat to provide us with food. So it wasn't like, you know, normal way that the barge comes, etc. No one was allowed on board. Just the food lifted, and I sent all the bills, signatures by the internet. Later on, we were getting other things like lube oil, because we ran out of lube oil and the engine cannot go. You know, you cannot tell engine, okay, sorry, no lube oil. It will just, you know, burn out, yeah, overheat. So slowly the ports were allowing more and more, like sludge, etc. You mentioned that problems with health. Yeah, the main problem is we cannot visit the doctor anymore. Because of the COVID, visit to the dentist requires the agent to come with the doctor, check the semen before goes. Then in a gas terminal also requires the gas terminal permission. So it was, you know, the whole day operation to send the OS, so now there was Messman, to see the dentist. You know, I can do the dentist job. My wife used to be a dentist, I mean, ex-wife. But so she gave me some crash course, yeah? So in a worst case scenario, I can do the extraction, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be 21st century, yeah? So these are the problems on board. Okay, the delayed going home is one problem, but lack of goods, lack of spare parts, lack of shore leave. I never have shore leave in 5 months, okay? There was no opportunities. And going to the doctor, it requires so much work, paperwork. In South Africa, they're nearly like, if only if you are dying. And in case of the captain, the question was, what the ship will do if the captain is not allowed back on board? What is the plan to the owner? That was the question from the authorities in South Africa. So, you know, if you are talking about deterioration of the crew health, at this moment, the crew depends solely on the captain's ability to provide them with the ship's medicines. We have no support in most of the countries like Africa, South America, even I don't know North America at the moment, but there is a very limited support to get from to see the doctor or anything like that. And that's the problem. You know, we can run it for some time, but this is what, September now, so that means 7 months. Come on, guys. This is getting out of hand. It was supposed to be 2-3 months, and it's already more than 6 months, yeah? So, and of course, as I'm home 10 weeks now, I have limited knowledge what is happening with the crew changes, but I got info from my friends that one of them is sitting home from November, and they offer him to go to Singapore, stay there 2 weeks in a lockdown with no pay. So he said, well, thank you, no. Yeah, the guys who have no American visa, they cannot disembark in America. So for some guys, they are on the ships, they will be reaching this magic 11 months or 13 months soon. I think 11 months, yes. So in my case, on my crew, I have one bosun who was 13 months when we finally managed to change the whole crew, and 3 guys were 11 months already. So, but I have to appreciate the owner efforts, because despite official no flights from Africa, they managed to organize the chartered flight. Of course, it was with my ideas and their full support, but they did it. They didn't mind the pay extra money. They went around the problem of some crew not having European visa, because there is some rule that if the crew doesn't have the visa, they cannot come to Europe for on a chartered plane, even if they do not stay in Europe, even if they just go to another gate to fly away, which is ridiculous. For seamen, should be suspended. That is one thing you can do, guys, because that really, for a moment, stopped the whole crew change. The fact that 4 guys have to stay in Ghana, and they said, okay, we will stay in Ghana. But then we had problem also to supply them with the protective gear. You're talking that there is shortage. Yes, there is shortage. You know, we get a kit which was like 200 gloves, 200 face masks, but they are one-time use. Yeah, if we use them properly, they will run out in a week time. So this is not realistic. So, you know, I'm using my one-time face mask for 1 month. Yeah, when the rubbers run off and parted, then I change it to the next one. But the young guys don't understand. You know, it's one-time use. They change it, you know, every hour. And you know, they are not. The young people are not more flexible like the old guys. They believe what they read in the regulations. Regulation says one-time use. They use one time and then put it to the bin. Yeah. So this non-flexibility is a problem in a real world when we cannot pop out to the apothec. When I asked first time when we approach first ports about, for example, thermometer, we have the thermometer regular based on, you know, measurement 5 minutes with contact. So to measure crew 2 times a day, I will need 5 hours spent on it alone, which is ridiculous. I asked this, you know, quick revolver type, you know, the shoot the guy and read the temperature. The answer was, we need for our people in Chile, we cannot supply. They only supply when we come back 1 month later. In Africa, everyone is using, but also they could not supply. So, you know, the supplies even of essentials, we seamen again, like with this fabulous rotten potato, good for seamen, yeah? That is the way, the treatment we get. This is how we see it. So don't expect us to be happy. I think my time is over, right?
Thank you, Artur. I think what you mentioned are some really good points. And if you on a high quality ship with a very good operator that is running your ships are already encountering that kind of problems, you can imagine how other, say, bulk carriers, general cargo with less high quality operators, what kind of problems that they would be having. And Peter, if I can come back to you, any particular success stories or not so success stories on crew changes that you were involved with? Peter, now you need to unmute.
Something funny with this program.
You can mute now, Captain Arthur. Yeah, we had a text message the other day from the Myanmar crew. They were in quarantine back in Myanmar to go home. I spoke to them a few weeks ago, and they were well over their time. The contracts were running into 14 months, 15 months, and they were desperate to get them. I really just sat and listened to them. I think it's the first person who sat down and listened to them, and they were desperate to get some movement. So we made, you know, give them some signposts, maybe some ideas of where to try and get help. And they've gone, and you know, they have text to say thanks for helping, just giving them a bit of guidance, a bit of support, and they've gone home. So they were really, really pleased to be away back there, because they saw no light at the end of the tunnel. And it's something I think the captain spoke about last time we spoke, was about people are prepared to wait on the ship, you know, but there has to be some kind of time. Okay, 2 months time, try and do it. I know the world's different at the moment, but it's that just nothing in front of you, you know, that no end to the voyage sort of thing. I think, well, that's the hardest part. If they've got something that says, right, 2 months' time, definitely we'll be moving you one way or another, then that's good. I was talking to some guys on a tanker the other evening as well. They seem to be getting crew changes regularly now. They're quite happy with their 6 months contract. They think that's going to be held and they're going to move on. So I met some guys who joined ships. So things were moving. The interesting thing is how they get to the ships as well, because obviously with flights, you're getting diverted to different countries and things like that. But yeah, so you know, it's nice, and we managed to keep in touch with the seafarers as well. They don't just leave the ship and then that's it. A lot of my volunteers keep in touch and have done for years, so we understand, you know, how they're doing and how the families are doing as well. So they like to keep in touch, and when they rejoin ships, they let us know as well. So yeah, there's a few successes. Things seem to be moving from what we can see in our part of the world. That was the main one.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things from what I take away from that as well is the communication part. Like you say, like Captain Artur was saying as well, the crew wouldn't mind staying a little bit longer on board as long as they are aware that the owners are trying to get them ashore. It's not the owner's fault that they can't go sometimes. Sometimes it really just simply depends on the schedule of the ship. If you keep ding-donging between Chile and Ghana, it's difficult to do a crew change. Or like what Artur was saying, if because of visa reasons you are unable to travel through a certain part where they finally manage to secure a flight, then the whole plan again falls into pieces and they have to start over. So I think communication there is really one of the main parts that owners need to ensure that is available. Not just communication for the crew, that the crew themselves can stay in touch with the family or that they can find out news on the internet, but communication between ship and shore as well, to make it clear this is when we are trying for you to disembark. And similarly for the crew that is on holiday at home and is waiting to get back on board, make it clear to them as well that at least there is a future still for them, because of course they're not getting any money when they are on holiday.
That's going to be the biggest cause of poverty. I think that there's a lot to come out now with those guys who've been at home 6 months and are not earning anything. I think how they've managed, you know, there's going to be a lot of poor families, and I think that's all got to come out over the next few months. We'll be hearing more and more about that. We'll be getting feedback from the families on that. Things. And the other thing about the communication, it's okay seeing the guys sitting down on the ship, you know, and supporting each other, but they then got the families and kids at home saying, "Daddy, when you're coming home?" You know, that's the pull for them as well. You know, that's the heartbreak. Well, you know, try to explain to young children, you know, where Daddy is, sort of thing, and why he can't come home is another part of it. That's part of the seafarer's life, I suppose, which seems to be worse at the moment because no guarantees of when you're going to get off the ship, and so you can't tell the family anything on that one.
Eve, I was just interested in what you said about communication and communication from companies to the ships. One particular ship company got in touch with us, and they'd got a ship in dry dock in a UK port. This is midsummer, and they just wanted, as Peter said, to get off the ship and feel the grass under their feet. So we, at very short notice, we organised that. We organised a very careful, socially distanced minibus trip out for them. And everywhere they went was closed. The beaches, the parks, everywhere they went was not accessible. And they enjoyed the day. You know, they had a couple of hours off the ship. I think they might have gone to a well-known fast food joint. But the value for them and for the management company, the operating company, was that they actually understood difficulties, that things that they were being told were actually true, or that it was worse. They just wanted to go on a beach and a park, and they couldn't. So that understanding that it is bad out there, and the management companies are genuinely trying hard. And I've spoken to quite a few large organisations who are doing their utmost to get crew changes done. They're spending all day, every day to do this, and there's real phenomenal cost, tripling of airfares and things like that they've got to put up with, but they're doing it. And I think you're absolutely right. That communication to the crews that we're doing all we can, it can't be reinforced enough. So we do what we can to help them, but as an exercise in proving that the situation is bad, it was actually quite effective for them.
And I think, yeah, Artur, okay. Please.
There is one point which you mentioned before about suicides, yeah? And my feeling is that actually, okay, it is increased probably on the ships, better, because you're paying some benefits, etc. But the problem is the kind of worldwide and ashore as well. I was a bit shocked a few years ago when I find out that more Polish people take suicide than dies in a road accident, which I always thought is the first after the heart attack. So the suicides are becoming popular because the way we bring up the children now. They are, the whole schooling time, avoid stress on any kind of, stress no good. And when they are actually coming to the real life, they are hitting the wall, not prepared. So this is why the young people are finding the way out by suicide. And this is, what is happening everywhere. And you should not actually look at the seamen. You should compare to the general population. And I will guess that we are actually much more sensible than the general population. So that was one thing which I wanted to add. And you see, you're saying that, okay, people are at home without money. That is true. The problem now is, which I'm facing shortly, hopefully, that I will be joining the vessel. And, I feel like joining the slavery, because no one can guarantee when I come back home, will I make next summer? This is the kind of question, because second wave of COVID is coming, so they say. And that is a problem, yeah. So, okay, if you have no other skills than being a seaman, then you have no choice and you hope for the best. But it will require the special setup of mind going next time to the ship, because that is going to be a brave thing to do. Of course, if you're financially pushed and forced to do it, there is no choice. But also, you work differently when you enjoy the work and the money, and differently when you are enslaved on the vessel. That's not helping.
Yeah, agree with you there, Artur. And looking at statistics a little bit, these are statistics that were released before COVID came into the world. Back in 2014, 2015, the percentage of deaths at sea was 4.4% of those seafarers dying was as a result of suicide. In 2018, 2019, only 4 years later, that had gone up from 4.4 to 18%. That's 1 in 5 seafarers that dies as a result of suicide. So it definitely is a problem, and that was before COVID. So now on top of those statistics, we have the issue of COVID and not being able to go home and being uncertain. Because I want to have some time for questions as well. So I was thinking, Peter, from your side, what is it that you would recommend from all the feedback you're getting from seafarers? Any takeaway that the ship owners should do in order to improve the well-being of the seafarers?
Well, the basic thing is the communication as well. But if you can provide free internet, to get the guys there, listen to them. If the chaplains aren't going on, there needs to be somebody on board. I'm sure the captain does it. Captain Artur there is listen to the guys as well. Some people just need to offload if they've been on the ship a long time. And again, something that's touched on before, different cultures on different ships create tensions as well. So there needs to be some understanding that they're all tough guys and very resilient, these seafarers, but sometimes they just need somebody to sit down and chat with and just offload it as well. And the other thing I think we all need to do in this is an industry is shout from the rooftops. We're too quiet about the life of seafarers. You know, in this, I'm talking about the Great Britain, we're an island, you know, we have lots of MPs in our government who have coastal constituencies, and we should be all taking responsibility after what we're saying to be writing to them all and saying, do you know what's happening? Because nobody links full supermarket shelves with seafarers. It just doesn't happen. And I think it's not just the higher ups in the IMO and all these people who go to the UN about it, but I think it's from all of us, from the ground root, and me included. There should be letters and emails going to our MPs and saying, do you know what's happening out there? These guys are not getting home, and without them, the situation's worse. So I think it's all our responsibility. Anybody connected with the sea and seafarers, it's agents, everybody should start a campaign of just bringing notice to people. We have a phrase in our part of the world that says, shy bairns get no broth. If you sit quietly, you don't get any food. You need to be shouting for it. So, and I need to take that on board as well, and my volunteers, as all of us, getting it to the higher governments. We're too quiet for too long, I think.
Thank you, Peter. I think that's really, really important. Artur, from your perspective, any takeaway, anything for the owner that you feel that should be done to help seafarers?
Well, I have, generally owners have to understand that, there is coming breaking point with the seamen's patience. I don't know when it's coming, and it's different for different people. But before COVID, the crewing department had a big problem to find the qualified people for the vessels. It's not going to be easy when the people are knowingly going to the slavery. The older people might decide they don't need more money, but the young people might decide, well, maybe I should go with my skills, I will find a job else. And that is the thing which will come, then it will be rising the salaries to find anyone to join, as usual. So, that is what is coming. So if the seamen are unhappy, they will start voting with their feet. Simple.
I think that's a really good message, Artur. Thank you so much. James, I know we are having a lot of questions, so thanks very much to everyone for putting your questions through. I think we have too many probably, but we will make sure that those that we cannot answer now, that we will answer via email, and we'll put it on our website. James, if you want to pass on any questions.
Safe to say, I've never seen so much comment and questions coming through the chat, and I think it's really, an output of the feeling and sentiment that our audience have, and sharing, the comments that you've all kindly provided. I mean, it's been, from my perspective, just sat here quite a sombering discussion. I think when we kicked off this series, probably the first one in May, I think there was some hope at that point that in 2 to 3 months' time, the situation might be easing, crew transfers might be able to take place. And what's really hitting me is that 3 months on, clearly the still same issues pervade, and nothing's got better. And I think to Peter's point, we all need to be shouting from the rooftops and raising our voices. We're all part of the industry, and we all have a responsibility, not only professionally, but also, I think, personally. And in that regard, it's been, I think, really grounding for me to hear from Captain Artur as to what life is like on board, and what the situation is, and all the work that's taking place to work with the crews, to help them. And it's great that Stella Maris are there to support from the shore side as well. So thank you all for your comments and for your observations. And I think really the themes that are coming through the chat, which I tried to summarize, but there is so much of it, is I think really the points that have been made in this discussion really are sort of 2 or 3-fold. One is that I think it's clear that there's a feeling that owners and crew are working together and communicating with one another in an effort to try to resolve the crew repatriations, to work with the crew to help them and manage their well-being and mental welfare. But the challenge there being the ability to get ashore and the lack of support from local authorities in providing access for crews to get ashore, whether it's provision of visas or otherwise. But there's definitely also another theme that's coming through the chat, which is that whilst the owners and the crew seem to be unified, they're not necessarily being supported by charterers, many of whom are making life even harder for owners than probably needs to be the case, and really not recognising their responsibility in all of this to support ship owners and their crew, and instead just hiding behind the provisions that are set out in the charter parties. I think the questions that we've got here, if I could direct 2 or 3 of them, if I possibly could. I think one is really it's in relation to the status of seafarers as key workers, and in particular, given the learnings from the current crisis, is there an argument that going forward, seafarers should be recognised as key workers, and as such being given a far stronger position, whether through convention or otherwise, to assert their rights and to ensure that if this pandemic goes on, that their key worker status is protected, and with that they receive certain benefits or allowances which would allow them to continue to operate and to get home when they need to get home. And I just want to put this question to this panel as to whether they believe that's something that could be possible, and whether or not they see that actually happening.
Ian or Peter, do you want to start off?
I think Artur has a good comment. I think Artur has a lot to say on this one from last time, so I'll defer to Artur.
The world needs arguments. Let's stop the ships for 1 week and we see how fast we will get our results. That's the only way. People understand force. You have to bang on a table and say that's it. Otherwise, as long as the supermarkets are full, nothing will change. That's our understanding. So we need to get a break point. It's always through the changes come through the blood. Let's hope it will be not ours. But for me to drop anchor for a week or 2, no problem. I get paid anyway, so I'm not paid for the ton of mileage. I'm paid for the time on board. Yeah. So for us, it's simple. And as I say, the world will face shortage of seamen one way or another, and lack of services. That's it. At the moment, the problem is the lack of communication and unity, because the owners and charterers are competing for the cargo. And as long as there is over size of the fleet and the competition, there is, it will not come. It only comes through action from the bottom, but that means blood. Sorry, some ships may have to, get tired. Some captains start beaching the vessels. And when you get catastrophic events, then only the public will see us again. Otherwise, it is nothing going to change. No discussion will change it. That's my perspective, my understanding. I do not volunteer to beach my vessel, but there will be someone who gets really, fed up. And that may be changing.
Actually, it's sorry,
Artur made a point.
Don't say that you are not warned.
Artur made a point last time we talked about the Seaman's Booklet, and I don't know the history of that, where that was the passport getting around the world, that some priority from the UN should be given to if you're carrying a Seaman's Booklet,
yes,
that you can move, and use that as the
Saudi Arabia. They don't ask your passport. That's not the last sensible country. They say we have agreement. Seamen travel on a seaman book. They never asked my passport, only when I landed in Europe. And we should return to it, because the seaman book is better than the passport. It should be. And the problem is that custom and immigration officers cannot read it. That's the problem. So they want passport. Yeah, because there is this small electronic lettering which allow them to enter to computer. That is the problem.
Thank you, Captain. And one for Peter and for Ian, I think, which is in relation to the work of Stella Maris. I mean, we've heard from Captain Artur about the challenges the crew are facing getting on board ships, and he's had himself in managing crew repatriations. From your perspective, getting your teams on board, are you seeing the issues being put up by local authorities or by port authorities, or are you finding actually you're still able to maintain the level of work you'd like to be doing?
I think, I mean, Peter will verify this. Our chaplains and our volunteers are hugely frustrated at the moment because their job is going on board ships and meeting seafarers, and I think the value in that day-to-day, 70,000 visits every year just going on board, it releases a lot of pressure, it releases tension, it improves mental health and mental well-being. And we can't ever prove it, but I think we because of that pattern of visiting, we prevent a lot of issues. We pick up on issues that seafarers wouldn't normally talk about, and we can do something about it. So not being able to do that, not being able to go on board and sit in a mess deck and have a coffee and talk about football and families and all of those good things, it's stopping. I think it's difficult to prove that we can prevent things happening, but we have a large impact in improving seafarer well-being, and I think Peter and his teams are frustrated in not being able to do that as effectively as they can. They see people from the gangway, but they've got to keep their distance at the minute.
Yeah, that's going to be fun with on the northeast coast of England when the winter comes in. We stand on the quayside trying to communicate. But we're in touch with the guys with social media. We do keep in touch with a lot of the guys on board with that as well. But you are right, Ian, it is frustrating that we're not back on. But we are now preparing to get back to the more of our volunteers in now. We're going to work through a procedure to make it safe and then get them back to the gangways as well. So more communication there.
Thank you. Something that's come through in this discussion, but also through in the questions clearly is, and actually Captain Artur mentioned it, I think in relation to some of his crew probably being better researched on which ports are doing crew transfers, than himself probably, because they obviously have an interest in keeping up to date with it. But Eve, are we aware, is there a centralised resource that's sort of giving details about what crew repatriations can take and where they can happen, or is someone coordinating that?
There definitely is, James, and one thing I wanted to mention earlier when Captain Artur was talking about the seafarers, certainly the younger seafarers who will find all the information themselves, it doesn't necessarily mean that they find the correct information. There's so many truths out there that people these days don't really know anymore which one is real or to use the famous word, the fake news. But yes, from an international group's perspective, there is a website that has been set up where anybody can basically go to, can log into, and can find information on what is available in which port, what are the restrictions, what are the numbers of COVID cases in those ports, what are the requirements. And that is really a good website that anybody can access. And on top of that, any owner can always contact their P&I club, and we can get in touch with our local correspondents to find out the latest information, because looking here in Singapore, it changes almost on a daily basis what the requirements are.
You mentioned before that you are, because of lack of ability to board the vessels, you are using the social media. Well, it's very nice, but as I was raising this point in a previous discussion, we will really appreciate the free Wi-Fi abilities on the jetties. We don't want this given to the vessel. The Wi-Fi gizmo should be on the jetty. I mean, the monthly price of internet is what, 10 euros, something like that? Yeah, 20. What is this in comparison to the money the vessel leaves behind? So this gizmo should be on every jetty, allowing, okay, the agent or whoever should bring the password, so that is available for the ships. but that will allow the crew to communicate with families when they are in port and with you guys, and that will really help, and that will definitely compensate for the lack of shore leave, for example.
I think all the ports need to be looking at that now. I think as an incentive, certainly around the UK and that, to provide free Wi-Fi access at all the ports. I don't know what the cost would be, obviously, but I think it's something that PIP should be aspiring to now. So, you know, in this day and age, you can get it anywhere else. It should be available on the ports and that. But again, there'll be a cost in that. I think it's definitely something the industry should be. Yeah.
For us on board, not having the internet is like we are second-hand citizens. Yeah. Okay, we don't pay income taxes in most of the cases, but the governments are working hard to make us pay now. But you know, not having access to internet, especially for young people, is one of the things that will put them off the job, because they have friends, they use Facebook, you know, excessively, and at the moment, say the internet we are getting not allow me to actually access social media much. So, you know, there are different levels of speed of internet available on board. It's one thing to send few photographs from the family, but to go live on the camera, that requires a bit more. And not all the ships, even if equipped with so-called internet, they can provide it. But when we are in a port, I met very often people wandering from other vessels, asking locals, especially like in France, where is the internet cafe? And the French are looking, what these guys want, because they stopped having internet cafes 10 years ago. But you know, the seamen from Philippines or places like that, they don't believe that everyone have internet in a phone. But when you connect your home phone to the French or Belgium especially network, suddenly money run out of crazy. They are overcharging per minute, like you know. I keep my phone off for that reason.
Yep, indeed.
I was talking with the port, the Tees and Hartlepool Port Users Association yesterday, and they were asking what they could do to help. And I said in the short term, provide mobile Wi-Fi units, so every ship that comes in could have one in the short term. And they were going away to look at that one as well. They were keen to help on that. But I think so.
Well, giving the Wi-Fi to the ship is always a problem, because 30% of ships sail with them. It is much better if this Wi-Fi equipment is on a jetty, and people can always, you know, find the space on the ship when they can reach it. But you know, very often I was giving this service before, and then with the problem to send it back from next port, I would prefer that the box stays on the jetty. Just give us the password. That's all we need. We don't want the gizmo on board.
Right, no more gizmos.
Clear messages coming through here, guys. I mean, I think you know, some of the points you said there, Captain Artur, is reflected in the chat that I can see, which is that general feeling that seafarers are treated as second class, whether that's in the treatment by the authorities in not allowing them ashore, or indeed whether it's the treatment in the countries that they arrive at, where people have fear about actually seafarers coming ashore, all of which makes me very sad. I mean, I think the role that the seafarer plays in providing everything to us in the way we expect it is so key. And as you said, it would only take all the ships in the world to stop for a week for us all to feel the consequences. And I think, so collectively, we need to bring our voices together. As Peter says, we need to shout out loud about these issues and raise them. I know that Stella Maris from their platform are doing so, and huge thanks to them for all the support that they're providing crews around the world. From the club's perspective, this is Yves, very much his area, and he's been very focused for years now on crew health and well-being, and I think it's all been polarized through COVID. And we, as a P&I insurer, as a member of the international group, are working with the other clubs also, insofar as we can, to leverage our position and raise our voice collectively on behalf of all of our ship owners to raise these issues. I think, Peter, you said it's there's no end to the void, and of course, or there's a feeling there's no end to the void, and clearly what we need to see is clarity for seafarers, such that they've got confidence that they will be able to get home, that they will be able to see their families, that the balance will be restored and their position and the importance of their position in society is recognised and that they're elevated. You know, with that, we all need to play our part in supporting that. So I think we're short on time. As Eve said at the beginning, we'd like to follow this webinar up with a message which will hopefully answer any of the questions we've been asked that haven't answered. We'd like to include the information, the video that Ian was going to put up during his section, telling a bit more about the work of Stella Maris. But also, I think from the club's perspective, it's our opportunity to share some more of the information that we've been doing, the work we're doing with our ship owners in terms of helping them support their crew from a mental health and well-being perspective. So, Eve, I mean, just from my perspective, Peter, Ian, Captain Artur, thank you so much for taking your time today and for being with us. It's been a hugely interesting discussion, reflected in, I must say, the amount of conversation that's coming through on the chat, and I can see from the attendance. So, guys, thank you so much. But final words over to Eve before we close.
I will echo your words, James. I thought this was a really interesting chat, and I look forward to seeing all the other questions that came in. I think some really important messages were set from Artur's side, Peter, Ian's side. Your messages were loud and clear, and I really hope that people are listening and noticing that it is really way too close to midnight at the moment. So again, from my side, thanks very much, Artur, Peter, Ian, for your time, and thanks everyone for attending, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Arthur has to stay online.
You want me off?
You have to stay on for a little while, yeah.
Okay.